Good morning and welcome to those I haven't greeted yet. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Rory. Yes, thank you. You're the official puppy of this session. The official puppy. The official puppy. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'd like to start with who you are, because that's what's most important. You, the audience. I imagine that you're a curious person who's knowledgeable in a particular domain, maybe even more than one, and someone who likes to share that knowledge with others. In other words, a geek like me. You probably like stories too, since most people do, and you want to tell yours in a way that's enjoyable to others. Well, you're in the right place. Well, how did I get that? Who am I? I'm the proverbial old programmer that literally worked on mainframes with bits and bytes and punch cards and lots of things that don't exist anymore. It's been a blast to grow with the times and to write about it. Currently, I run a game studio that I founded, and I'm writing a custom game engine for visual novels called Watson. Like any author, I'm an avid reader too. That's where I get all my best ideas. But instead of dragging you through stuff I've written, we'll look at popular examples of storytelling techniques from other people. Hopefully you'll recognize some of those in this article too. If you'd like to see more of my writing, it's all linked from my site. I welcome your feedback and ideas. What are we doing? I promised a goal-oriented session, so here's the goal. Over the next half hour, you'll gain a working approach to writing your own tech story for education, entertainment, or even something dull like documentation. While I'll talk specifically about writing for software development, these same ideas apply to all kinds of technical writing, like engineering, math, and science education too. Every piece of writing tells a story, like the label that says "Drink Me" on the bottle that sends Alice into Wonderland. The techniques we'll examine come from classic storytelling like we find in books and movies. Can we tell a story that conveys our message and is engaging to the reader too? We've already covered the intro. This was it. Next, we'll look at storytelling as a whole, then dive into the research you should do before writing. Next, we'll examine style and how it affects your message and audience. And finally, we'll look at the spit and polish steps you need to before you deliver your piece. At the end, we'll have time for questions. Let's give it a go. And I keep doing that. A story isn't much fun if we just say, everything was great at the start, nothing much happened, and everything was great at the end. A story of interest needs conflict and resolution. Put in programming terms, we could call it input, process, output, or even state management. The protagonist is in the new state after resolving the conflict. In software writing, the initial state tells readers the conditions under which you set out on your journey. What were you trying to make? Where were you trying to go? With what and why? This exploratory part of your writing describes where you went. Did you open up WYSIWYG or Doc 7.0? Did you start with code you already had or a blank slate? Did you change your mind halfway through the course? If so, why? Conflicts abound in code, so find an interesting one to talk about. The battle here is the battle you go through to resolve your coding conflict, whether that's fixing a bug, doing more reading and learning, rethinking your architecture, or switching up your tools, your battle weapons. The resolution describes what we got from the battle. To the victor go the spoils. Tell us about them and your losses too. Before you write, it's a good idea to have a reason for the reader to read. Everything you put down should create a path for the user toward that ending. If the goal is to teach a beginner, can a beginner follow your steps to the finish line? If the goal is to encourage exploration and discovery, are you offering any pointers to the hallways and crevices where that might take place? Don't ever think that your journey is irrelevant. No matter where you are in your technical career, from newbie to court-appointed expert, there is someone else who's also at that stage, or the one just before it or after it. They'll appreciate your unique human perspective. And while on that subject, if you don't have a unique takeaway to offer, or a unique way to tell it, perhaps a different topic would be better. Be sure your writing adds value for the reader by identifying that value before you start. To continue our film analogy, our story will take place in one or more locations. Programming is full of locations. It's turtles all the way down. Everything from your sketch on a napkin to your actual data format in JSON or the TypeScript code you wrote to process it is a location where software happened. To tell the story of software, then, we must go to those locations and replay the events. Too many software articles, especially in the age of AI, glance over these important details. This is akin to the everything is fine story, which we've established is uninteresting. Don't be afraid to return to the scene of the crime to gather evidence. I won't say it's an enjoyable part of writing, any more than digging through the dumpster is an enjoyable part of detective work. But two things come to mind. First, I'm grateful that I have these artifacts to include in my writing. I go and screenshot my own files long after I've finished with them. Diagrams too. They're evidence of my programming crimes. Secondly, these documents add significantly to the sense of reality in the writing. Even if I don't show everything, I do look at these artifacts before I write about the events to make sure I'm reporting accurately. Dialogue in tech writing takes two forms. First, the internal dialogue that you had with yourself while developing the software or learning the process or whatever you were doing. And second, the external dialogue that you're having with your reader. You are both the main character and the narrator, so feel free to switch back and forth as necessary. The type of words you choose will tell the reader how you felt about the process. Was it horrifyingly complex? Delightfully easy? Was it simple and straightforward or labyrinthine and tedious? Use words and writing structures that themselves have those properties to make your dialogue stand out. English is a coding language. It's coding for human understanding. Think of the best data format from specific words to sentences, paragraphs, and chapters that present the information you want the reader to receive. There are as many different ways to write something as there are writers. An old adage of movie making is show, don't tell. It works in writing too. It's very common to see technical articles which simply announce some great discovery or feat, but never show how it's done. By showing, here I mean showing with words. A dangerous precedent in software development is to stay in our ivory tower and not reveal how we turn straw into gold. That's fine if you're in the PR department, but it doesn't make for great technical writing. In fact, that kind of writing can tarnish your brand because it feels overhyped and self-promotional. In technical disciplines and in science, failing to show how you arrived at your results leaves a bad smell on your papers. Instead of writing out a foregone conclusion, show the reader in words how you arrived at that conclusion and let them come to it by their own route. Short social media posts have taken over our consumption of information, but they're no replacement for long-form writing. To put it bluntly, not everything in the universe can be condensed into 256 characters. If you are a programmer, you know this to be true. It's part of information theory. So don't cheap out on your own writing. Give all the deets. Show how you built your castle. You don't want to be a TikTok reel lost in a sea of the same kind of content. Everyone's doing the same meme writing, but only one person wrote your favorite book. Your particular experience is detailed, unique, and insightful. Don't be afraid to show us how. Regardless of your intent, in all forms of communication, it is the recipient who decides what the message will be. Try as we might, we can't force anyone to see things our way or to read things our way. It's best not to take too firm a stance on this. Art wants to be free for interpretation. Some may conclude that you're a revolutionary genius, while others dismiss you out of hand over a stupid error or an opinion you shared. Early in his career, Andy Warhol gifted an original painting of his to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. It was rejected on the grounds that they would have nowhere to keep it. Decades later, and posthumously, The museum released a catalogue raisonné of his work that opened with an apology from the director. You clear the way for the interpretation you want by removing unnecessary material that might distort the representation. Gone with the Wind was widely hailed on its release, along with the work of James Watson, the discoverer of DNA. But both the art and the science were tarnished by the overt racism of their creators. The Disney attraction shown here, Adventure Through Inner Space, changed my life when I rode it as a child in the 70s. While on that ride, itself a patented Disney technology, I decided to do something in tech or space or science. And that's not accidental. One of Disney's primary goals was to inspire Americans to heights of business and technical leadership. In this case, it worked. While writing my most complex and comprehensive AI article, I used ChatGPT extensively to ensure I wasn't making up wrong explanations or misinterpreting how AI tools are really built. In fact, the whole goal of the article was to demystify that very thing and remove the layers of hype and dismissal that cloud every discussion of AI today. It wouldn't be great if that article weren't 100% technically accurate. How can I achieve that level of accuracy without being an expert in the subject? A fact I admit at the top of the article. Well, every path to learning starts out somewhere, so I read a lot, then ask ChatGPT attorney-style questions. These are the ones that start with, is it true that? Or do you mean that? Because they reveal my understanding of the material. Attorneys ask these questions because they already know the answers. So you can use AI to test that you know your stuff too. When in doubt, look it up is a rule that my school teacher mother and grandmother enforced in our house. With AI, you can craft a prompt question that gets to the heart of your issue, learn from the answer, then use the new information to write something better in your original material. I would not suggest that anyone rely on AI answers alone. Since they're missing the human element of curiosity and exploration, they won't have enough juice in them to drive your story. Instead, use what you learn from AI or already know as a jumping off point to learn more from traditional sources. Reading other technical writing can be helpful. Reading documentation and official sources is very helpful because that stuff is usually correct. Also, explore real-world examples of the thing you're talking about so that your discussion doesn't stand in isolation. Examining how another programmer approached the same problem can help cement your decision to do it the same way or to do it differently. Accuracy is extremely important in tech writing. It's better to be more accurate and less thorough than to put out more information which isn't all 100% correct. We've all experienced the frustration of reading some tech treatise that starts with, Eureka, I found it. But when we follow their steps, there's no there. This is another guy you don't want to be, and the net is full of them. Temper your enthusiasm for sharing with deliberate double checking so that every line of your text is factually correct. If you don't know or haven't explored something, say that. This technique, which we now call forensics, was first demonstrated by the fictional character Sherlock Holmes. Up until Arthur Conan Doyle wrote him into existence, even the world's most sophisticated police departments relied on wild speculation and fantasy ideation to solve crimes and put people in jail or worse. Researching and showing real-world instances of something has three benefits. It provides familiar points of reference for the audience. It shows that your connections and thought process are not random, and it proves that it can be done, which you're supposedly claiming in your text. In the early days of film, actors found that moviegoers actually believed they just acted and came up with their own lines on the spot. Now, aside from the terrific improvisational style we see in shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm, most movies and TV are scripted. Even so-called reality shows are heavily scripted and guided on rails through location and event setups that produce specific dramatic outcomes. In contrast, examine a space opera like Star Wars. an epic film series with generational impact. It's no exaggeration to say that Star Wars is to modern society as Greek mythology was to the Greeks. George Lucas has said that the entire story was visible in his mind from the start, and that the various films are the incarnation of the story's parts as he imagined them. One does not just sit down and write a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away and run it out from there. There's a big set of scaffolding underneath that. Come here, come on. With landing places for many different characters, along with various sharp edges and rusty nails on which they develop their facets. Hang on a second. Thank you. Stay with me. Crazy Pitbull. As you brainstorm over how you will get the reader to the takeaway, write those ideas down as the main points in your outline and put them in the right imperative order, like writing programming code. If there's some juicy plot line or revelation, be sure it has a landing place in your scaffold that makes sense along the hero's journey. In other words, don't tell the ending at the beginning unless you're deliberately writing Sunset Boulevard or Reservoir Dogs. We've all met people who derail a story as soon as they start telling it. It was supposed to be about a trip to Disneyland, and now it's a detailed description of a wreck they saw along the way. We call those people boring. Don't be that guy. To prevent boredom, break your work up into chunks and chapters. You can blame MTV, who introduced quick editing cuts in its music videos, or the print version, the excellent books by the publishing house DK. They're like encyclopedias on a single page. Everything is blocked out, organized, and constrained for quick consumption. Social media inherited the patterns from these previous formats. Everything is a short reel now. Great. Guess what? You can write an entire story full of short reels of content that can be easily digested on their own. A big set of your readers won't read the whole thing anyway. We know this because you and I don't read the whole thing with everything we come across either. Knowing that, we should try to create at least some parts that they will want to read and make those clear. Your outline will help define the natural chunks of your story. Within the journey, each phase itself has several parts. Those are good candidates for section headers or a photo break. If you find the article itself is too long, don't compromise the quality. Instead, group your chunks into chapters and release the first set as the first part of a series. With educational material especially, this chunk and chapter method is important. Learning takes work. It burns calories and literally tires people out. And not that folks don't love it. Skiing is tiring too, and no one complains about that. But respect your audience's limits by dividing your magnum opus into reasonable parts. Look for the holes. We know people get lost reading a story or watching a movie. We've all done it. We might lose the plot or forget who a character is or why they're doing something. But in teaching, the teacher should anticipate the places where the reader might get lost. Since we're not in an interactive classroom where folks can stop and interrupt us, we have to pause and interrupt ourselves in our writing when holes are visible to us that might not appear to the reader. While someone may value you more as a programmer for what you know, they'll value you more as a writer for what you share. In many ways, this is in contrast with programming itself, a solitary and silent affair. Whenever there's an opportunity to level up your reader or a place to say, mind the gap, it should be up for consideration. They'll actually think more of you as a programmer for being willing to explain your work. Both Lady Gaga and Lizzo are known for pop performances, but they're also both classically trained musicians, the former a pianist, the latter a flautist, and both have used those skills to great benefit in their careers. By sharing that part of their journey, they enlighten and inspire the audience. Katharine Hepburn and Coco Chanel are both famous for defying style by creating their own. In turn, the styles they wore set the standard for millions of designers and fashion customers and costumers to follow. In your writing, tone and color help set the style. The Agatha Christie film, And Then There Were None, the first one on this slide, is a serious detective work. That same type of story was later spoofed by Clue, making a farce of the original settings, events, and characters. Today, the Knives Out franchise attempts to reboot the detective genre with a different tone, one focused on more realistic, character driven interactions and less on deaths and murders. In a movie, props and dialogue add color to a scene. We hear a familiar song on a TV in the background or see a storefront we recognize in a street scene. In all three example films, the buildings, clothes, and sets add interest to the story and define it for the audience. These clearly aren't films about boating, for example, but there are detective films that take place on a boat, like Christie's Death on the Nile. Now, why are all her stories set in stuffy academic environments like dusty archaeological digs, creepy old mansions, and somber river cruises? Because that's the world she lived in and traveled with her archaeologist husband. Your writing and speaking tone and the coloring agents you add to your scenes will help the reader feel like they're in situ in the original place where your story takes place. All stories have elements of heat and light. Stories that are all heat are things like action movies, TikTok reels, and mainstream headlines. You will not come away from heat elements with any new information. It seems like information, but not really. News headlines fall in this category because they're explicitly designed not to teach you anything, but to amp up your emotions. It's all heat. Now, stories that are all light are things like scientific papers, product warning labels, and instructional manuals. These tend to be dry and unemotional, but you could learn a lot. People used to hate documentary films because they were all of this type. Now they're one of the most popular genres. Viewed this way, James Cameron's Titanic is a modern documentary as it tells a true story with tremendous intentional accuracy. In the 70s disaster film, The Towering Inferno, the peak of the genre, more than half the movie is expository. It tries to show us all the reasons the event took place, laying out the past and predicting the future for the characters. Well, that's not a lot of action for an action movie. Now, contrast that with the latest Superman or the new Fantastic Four movie, which skips most explanations altogether and moves from action to action. There are no setups in those films. Things are announced and then take place in the next scene. If your tech writing is all action, it sounds like an advertisement or a cartoon. If it's all explanation, it sounds like the manual. Aim for something in between, a balance of heat and light. We nerds love our fancy words and technical terms. They're a badge of honor, and I include myself in this group. But we do a disservice to our reader if we use words in a way that can't be understood by people unfamiliar with them, or when we throw around tech vocabulary without context or explanation. While it may make us feel smart to know all these words, it makes the reader feel dumb to not know them, a side effect we definitely don't want. But you can pepper your writing with interesting words if they're clear in context or explicitly explained. The scenes in this slide are from The Taming of the Shrew, a Shakespeare play filmed in 1967 with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, and 10 Things I Hate About You, a modern retelling of the same story released 408 years after the original play was written. Now you can guess which version is more relatable to a modern audience. People you know have heard of the modern movie. Do they know the play? Well, they both have the same hero's journey, the same conflicts and resolutions, and the same takeaway. So I'd say yes, viewers of the modern movie also know the play. How cool is that? I was surprised to find several readers highlighting my medium stories with just a single word or two. It didn't make sense until I realized those folks are learning English or trying to improve their own writing. They were noting my examples, not tech examples, words and constructs in English, so they could use them in their own writing. Sweet. Can you advance for me? No? Is it giving up? Uh-oh. All right. Plan B. Everyone is a brand now, whether you want to be or not, as soon as you post something on the internet. A person who reads one thing you wrote can easily find everything you wrote. Does your writing as a whole convey the image that you want? Knowing that someone who hasn't met you or read anything of yours can easily read all of it before they decide to engage with you, well, that has to change the way we view writing. It was never possible before. People lived for millennia without even paper, much less newspapers, and it was likely you'd have no prior knowledge of someone you just met. Now, the reverse is true. When I was a kid, my grandmother told me something her grandmother told her. Never do anything you don't want to read about in the newspaper. Well, since your writing is already in the paper, we could say don't write anything you don't want to be known for. I have many, many interests, and I love to give opinions on all of them. But my brand is trusted software expert. So it's important to stay in that lane. And after 30 years in the software business, I only write what I know and what I can back up. There's little room for speculation and no room for ad hominem attacks or wild pronouncements. If someone were to read those, my brand would lose its sheen. The next thing I write would be just a little less believable, a little less reliable, a little less trustworthy. It's not worth it. Easter eggs, the cultural references that writers drop into their work, have existed long before the term was coined by an Atari developer in 1979. In his seminal book, Everything Bad is Good for You, Stephen Johnson shows that the rapid fire increase in cultural references in movies and TV actually increases our brain stimulation when we watch them. He traces the difference in cultural references per hour in shows from the 50s through the new millennium, pointing out that a show like South Park has hundreds more per hour than Dick Van Dyke. The reason it's good for you is that these references cause additional neurons to fire in your brain while accessing the complementary material. And they also release dopamine because you're rewarding yourself for recognizing them. A more elaborate version of Easter eggs, known as fan service, evolved from video games, particularly visual novels and anime games. That content is extra to the game itself. It usually consists of new illustrations, costumes, or locations, and is given to players as a reward for their love of the characters, shown by completing scenes or goals. In any case, these references should amplify the message you've already stated and not replace it. In other words, don't rely on someone getting your joke to get the takeaway of the article, chapter, or paragraph. What Easter eggs or fan service items could spark readers in your writing? An Easter egg could be as small as the one on this slide, while fan service could be as big as writing a whole development story from the perspective of the Star Trek holodeck. And it looks like I'm going to run a little over on time. I hope that's okay, guys. We're almost there. The first books with pictures were the gorgeous illuminated manuscripts produced by monks from about the year 500 through the 14th century, when the work was turned over to commercial firms. The printing press, which eliminated the work of scribes, didn't have illustrations at all at first, and when it got them, they were woodcuts. Photorealistic images created from tiny dots wouldn't be possible in printing until the late 1880s, when the halftone screen was commercialized. Today, you can add images to your writing as easy as cut and paste, and you should. It's simply not true that books are for children, that picture books, sorry. They're for everyone. It was technical limitations all along that prevented us from having pictures everywhere. Now we even have online editing and composition tools, so you can make things like these slides or my diagram for the hero's journey. It's not that we didn't always need that stuff. It was just a lot harder before. Now that it's easy, go to town. I must also say I think that AI images will largely detract from your work. There's just too much sameness. That's not to say if you're writing about AI content or using that in your product, you shouldn't show it. But if you're not writing about AI pictures, we probably don't want to see them in your article. The world is full of beautiful images you can use without fear of copyright retribution, as they are merely citations and references in your work. This educational use of imagery has long been protected in the United States. But there's a big difference between including a screenshot as part of your commentary and pretending that it was your original work to begin with. This was a lot shorter when I read it before, guys. In technical writing, the informative pictures aren't as exciting as the glossy cover photo, but they are exciting to the reader when he or she can use them as an example to actually get her done. Too often in technical articles, we say, just use the whizzy bang feature without ever telling what that feature is or how to use it. As a dev, you know better than most that most UIs are awful. We have trouble with them, and we work in this field. Imagine how much difficulty other people have in grokking the user interface. Just don't make them do it. If there's a place where a screenshot can illuminate how you did something, take the screenshot from your IDE. If your prompt worked a miracle, show us what it was. If there's a control or a setting to turn on, screenshot it for the next guy. If your data is cool, paste the JSON in a code block. One thing you can forget about is the idea that someone will steal it. They won't. Just like other people's code and screenshots aren't useful in your code, yours aren't directly useful to them. No one really cares. Now, obviously, don't screenshot API keys or proprietary information, but the how and why of what we do in software is rarely proprietary. It's just pride that makes us say so. Clickbait as a term may have been invented by the internet, but as a concept, I think the credit goes to William Randolph Hearst, the famous newspaper publisher and yellow journalist. He knew that headlines sold papers. It's not a bad thing. We're all fighting the attention economy. The founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, said, "We aren't competing with other media, we're competing with sleep." A series of short, catchy headlines can help in three different ways. First, it guides the reader through the article, showing that you followed the outline you set up and showed if you decide to do that. Second, it helps to grab attention and pull the eye in toward the next paragraph, like a light in a harbor. Finally, it sets up expectations for what the reader will experience next. Combined with a summary at the end, this forms part of an old strategy called tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. Whoops, how do we get there? We're almost to the end. Notes and references are another thing that used to be difficult, but thanks to technology, no longer is. Now, who remembers AP style from college? It's quite a bit of work to exhaustively research and format everything you quote or reference, isn't it? Today, you can Google it for them and find the exact link to the thing you're talking about. Now, this actually gives you a special power because if they go on their own, who knows where they'll wind up? After all, Google isn't set up to have them click on the same stuff you clicked on. But if you provide a direct link, there's a good chance the person will follow it, especially if they're curious or underinformed on the topic. That's an opportunity for teaching and a demonstration of your writing and research without you having to write that other material. Bonus points. In some cases, you'll want to add footnotes to your text or inline notes as you prefer. Some things just merit extra clarification, like these images from my story about a software engineering disaster that led to a plane crash in Antarctica. That's not an easy location to visualize, so I included two pictures, the I'm standing there view and the where in the world is Carmen Sandiego view, which I created with Google Maps. At the end of that article, I added links to both the books and the film sources I had used in researching the article. In the trades, they say measure twice, cut once. And Ernest Hemingway said, write drunk, edit sober. Perhaps combining these ideas, we could say that the creative state you need for great writing doesn't always lend itself to the best spelling, grammar, formatting, organization, typography, photography, links, etc. Despite reading my work several times while writing it, I always find errors after it's published. As with many things about writing, this used to be a big deal because of technological limitations. Getting words into a printed, published, distributed book is quite an undertaking. Those words are fixed long before they get to the reader with no way to change them. In contrast, what you write online can be instantly updated by you, even if you find a mistake while reading on your phone from the couch. And you should read it from several devices and locations because proofreading is shown to give different results under different conditions. The good news about these small typing errors is that other than errors of logic or gross sentence misconstruction, the human eye will actually skip most of your errors and read the correct words. This is the reason that your friends aren't useful for proofreading. Inevitably, they don't actually see the mistakes. I even revisit articles months after I've written them and catch small mistakes. My worst ones are in picture captions. I make them while trying to rearrange the text into a concise sentence. Learn to spot your own most frequent errors so that you give them the extra attention when you're done writing and start reading your own stuff. Whoosh, we did it. All right, guys, we made it to the end. I'm so happy to see all of you here. How many folks do we have with us right now? Let's check it out. 29, woohoo. A big round of applause for all of you. I'll stay here as long as anybody wants me to. Feel free to open your cams or put your hands up or whatever they'll let us do. Text me, email me, write me, whatever works for you guys. I'm going to read through some of this chats here. Thank you for the compliments on my sweet Rory. She's a rescue. My office mate, yes. Thank you, Georgie. Thank you, Monica. Not eager to write if I find a perfect article. Man, you're so right. I don't want to write an article that I could already read either. Like, what's the point, right? But that means that when you get to it, that's the real one. That's your juice. When you come up with your special insight or your special way to tell it. Francesca, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. Josh, thank you for being here. Ariane, thank you so much. All right, fantastic. I'm going to close, guys. I hope to hear from you again, and we'll definitely see you here next year. Bye-bye.